Hello, I'm Tanya, and I'm going to tell you about our recent 1 week trip to the Cook Islands. I'm just recording this for my family. No one else is going to watch it, so hey. But I was reading this book, Good Old Lonely Planet, and I just booked it last minute. We stayed in a cheap backpackers in Rarotonga. Then we flew on a cheap flight to Aitutaki, cheap being 5 a.m. So the sun hadn't risen. And we stayed there 2 nights in also a cheap backpackers, but so worth it for the way we were treated. Oh my goodness, I'll go into that in a moment. And then we flew back, another cheap flight. It was late at night. And then we stayed in a slightly nicer place on Lagoon in Rarotonga, which had we had our own bed each, our own kitchen and bathroom. So that was really cool. But yeah, to start out with, the backpackers we stayed in, both of them, they picked us up at the airport, no charge. They looked after us so well, took us around both the islands. When we got to Aitutaki, I have to give a shout out to, I think his name was Ned. It was Aitutaki Budget Accommodation is the name of the place. He picked us up in the black before dawn, gave us flower lays around our necks. It just looked after us so well, bought enormous plates of food from a group of people who were cooking early in the morning to try and raise money for a dart team, of all things, like darts, so they could get their dart team from Aitutaki to Rarotonga. And, you know, who can eat a plate piled with sausages and whole fish and sides of beef at 5 a.m, and taro and seaweed and enormous buckets of raw fish. And there was so much food. And then we had a beautiful cold coconut each, and he wouldn't accept any money. And he drove back to the end of the runway. This is like a coral runway that the Americans built in World War II, and that's why Aitutaki has the capacity for these little twin propeller planes. And so that's why Aitutaki gets tourists. And yeah, there were other travelers there who were just kind of sitting on the beach at the end of the runway because it was way too early to check in. And he invited them all over. He's like, hey, come on, get some good food into you. And we all shared the food, and then he dropped everyone where they needed to go. And he then took us to a coffee place where everyone was having coffee with coconut milk before work. And by that time, I was with my 13-year-old and we were starting to fade. So he dropped us at the backpackers and let us have the bed early, and went and got us bicycles because we said we wanted to be able to get around. He got another girl a motorbike. It was just insane that I've never been treated so well by anyone. No 5-star hotel has ever treated us that well. So thank you so much, Ned. There were piles of papaya and banana for us, and then all that food, we just didn't go hungry for days. But anyway, getting back to, the whole of the Cook Islands thing. So Rarotonga is actually, it was quite reasonable in terms of temperature. It wasn't that hot. And then Aitutaki is about 250, 300 k's north, but it was so much warmer and a really different kind of island. It's like a coral atoll. It doesn't have dogs everywhere like Rarotonga has. It doesn't have huge high mountains because Rarotonga was volcanic, whereas Aitutaki is a coral atoll. So it's just got like a little hill that I climbed up one morning, and it was quite a beautiful walk. And then all the different islands in the Cook Islands have their different thing. Like one of them, they all pick coffee, and another one, they've got the black pearls, and another one, they make these incredible hats out of palm leaves. So they've got their thing that they're really proud of. And before they were united as one, like the Cook Islands, they were actually all their, that they weren't a united country. It was like their little island was their island. So that was really interesting. And they speak Maori. They've got the strongest Maori culture. And I was so amazed to see all the parallels with New Zealand and the New Zealand Maoris. You know, like in New Zealand, they say kia ora for hello. And in the Cook Islands, they say kia orana, which I think it's like a more elaborate way of saying like, hello, God bless you very much, or something like that. Excuse my ignorance. But yeah, and then so learning about the Cook Islands was amazing because they are the ones who discovered New Zealand, and they sailed there and established the whole Maori race there, and where the Cook Islands have these lovely dances that they do, almost like the Hawaiian, you know, it's all part of Polynesia. They all speak the same language, and Tahiti and East Island, it's all interconnected. But you know, they have their lovely dance, and then down in New Zealand, it turned into like this, like haka, like with anger. And they had the joke saying that if you went to New Zealand and experienced your first winter, you'd get angry too. And then they've got all these creation myths about how they went there and then how they came back. And it was so great to kind of learn a little bit more about the culture, and just how strong it is. Like they all have their own land, and the land gets passed down. They never sell. So a lot of the houses have enormous graves in the front yard with things like, you know, we love you, Daddy, on the grave. Like, you know, it's sad but beautiful as well, because they're dead are front and center of their life, and they're remembered. And, you know, I saw a grave covered in frangipani leis and glitter, and a beautiful portrait of the girl looking out to sea, and just a really lovely way to remember. And then the families are so strong. Like on Aitutaki, they're all on the tarmac waving the plane goodbye, going, "We love you, Uncle, we love you." And, you know, they're wearing the beautiful flower head things, and little chickens just, not on the runway, but in the check-in area. I just loved all that stuff. So that was really great. And, you know, we didn't have like a 5-star kind of experience, but it didn't matter. And I did a bit of cycling around. Unfortunately, Zadie, my daughter, got quite sick. So I had this plan that she would be, you know, she would be Wi-Fi free for the week, and snorkeling and trekking. And I bribed her by saying, you need to read one book and go for one hike. And that didn't happen because the poor thing, she was really sick. I got the flu jab before I went, but I forgot to get it for her. So that's a lesson for next time. She's better now. She's good. And there was a chemist on Rarotonga that gave us Panadol and ibuprofen. But yeah, as for the food, we didn't really eat any restaurants, but there are massive servings. It's so funny. So we didn't starve. The supermarkets have imported New Zealand food, which is very expensive, like $15 for a yogurt. I guess things like dairy and stuff are going to be expensive. But then you realise there's a way to do it island way, you know. There's pawpaws everywhere, and you know, coconut milk everywhere. So I'm sure if I'd given myself a bit more time to get into island time, I could have kind of got into that a bit more too. And when we were in Aitutaki, the girl who was staying also in the backpackers, I love staying in the backpackers, by the way, especially with kids, because like teenagers, when they give you a bit of a hard time, they can't, because there's so many travelers. There's like a Japanese girl who'd had a stroke, and she was telling me all about her stroke. And then there was a French guy who had, you know, just sailed there from Tahiti and done this amazing sailing. And we had our own room, but then the kitchen was like a joint area, and it was so cool. So, you know, it forces your kids to kind of interact a bit. And that was really cool. But this Canadian girl, Ned, went and got her a motorbike, and she wasn't too hot on driving it. She said, I'm not very good. And she had a little go on the field, and I don't think there's many rules in Aitutaki. I think you can sort of do what you want. They're not strict like in Rarotonga, where you have to get an international license. So anyway, she just drove up and down the field. They said, you'll be fine. And she was fine until she wasn't. And she was apparently driving really slow, and she just got the accelerator and the brake mixed up, and she tore off and fell and took the skin off all over her. And she was in the hospital for the day. and they, you know, they really cared for her. But the next day she went snorkeling and she was just in a world of pain with all the open wounds. So I really hope, if you see this ever, Maya, I hope you're better. But that was a bit of a wake-up call. Don't get a motorbike. There's lots of utes, and you can get lifts in the back of the utes and just sit up on a bench seat. And I think the best thing to do of all is the Lagoon tour on Aitutaki. You can either do the expensive way, which is a day trip from Rarotonga, $600, but it includes the flight there, the whole day on the Vaka boat, the food, the buffet food, and then you fly back. And also those flights are in daylight, so you get to see the amazing lagoon from the air, which I kind of regret. But we did it the cheap way by booking the flights ourselves. So instead of 600, I think I got the flights for 150 each, so 300. And then the lagoon tour was 150 each. So I guess I paid the same price, but there were two of us. And we were there for a couple of nights. So that was really cool. And there's a bit in Aitutaki around the runway where you get the kind of long finger of land, and there's a very luxurious hotel there, but they're kind of on their own island, and I sort of feel sorry for them. I think I met someone and they said it was really boring. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're in a kind of weird bubble. Like, don't you want to hang out with the locals a bit? But each to their own. I swam in the little, you know, ocean bit out the front there. And yeah, it was really beautiful. I definitely want to spend more time in the Cook Islands. I also walked up on Rarotonga to the peak. It was called the Cross Island Hike. I think it was 80 New Zealand dollars, which is about 40 euro. And that was really beautiful, and it ended at a waterhole. And I just loved it. I loved meeting other travelers. I loved speaking to the guy who ran it. It was a really beautiful thing to do. And the only other tour we did was on the Cook Island, on Rarotonga, sorry. We did the snorkeling tour. But unfortunately, the company we went with, we didn't see any turtles because a dive crew had just been there and sort of scared the turtles off. But in saying that, I still appreciated it because he taught my daughter a lot of free diving techniques. I guess the most important one is just let all the breath out of your air, all the air out of your breath as much as possible, and more and more and more until you've absolutely got nothing. Then take the biggest breath in that you possibly can, and then you dive, which I find interesting because if I've got a full lung of air, I can't go very deep. I have to let it all out, and then I'll drop to the bottom. But, you know, each their own, you learn different techniques. And I can't equalize very fast. So we sort of just floated around on the top while this guy spent a lot of time on the bottom blowing air rings and showing off. But look, it was all fine. And my daughter said she's never done anything like that. So that was really cool. And she loved patting all the dogs. They're really friendly. They're well looked after. They've got collars on, and there are charities that look after them. So, yeah, it was such an interesting time. And I hope this video enlightens you a little bit. Thanks for listening.
I don't know.